I'm Nic Merriman. I'm the head of cloud computing at Avanade UK. It says though here I'm Nicholas Merriman. I got lumbered with that at birth, and it seems to have followed me all the way through my life, but I am Nick for those who want to talk to me. I just want to talk to you then about how you build a cloud strategy and really how you start to develop cloud and how it links in with your overall architecture, your enterprise, and the things you're trying to achieve as a business. I think we heard in Andrew's panel session how cloud, to some extent, is a word, a marketing term, is kind of doing a disservice to how you take advantage of all those different technologies. So I've been with Avanade just coming up for 2 years. I've gone back into service provider SI land. Before that, though, I was the CTO of Halifax Bank of Scotland in the retail banking division, and after we merged, I looked after the wealth and international piece. So I come from an enterprise architecture, enterprise strategy background. So I want to really try and bring some of that experience and some of the ideas around how we can use technology to drive some of your real business goals. Now, before I kind of go on, I think it's incumbent on me really to tell you a little bit about Avanade, and it's not meant to be a sales pitch at all, just so you know who we are. Avanade is the leading Microsoft systems integrator. We've been around about 11 years now. As you can see, we're spread quite diversely over many countries, many different locations. Reasonably large revenues and very successful. And we were set up by two of our key parents, Accenture. I work very closely with Andrew in his cloud initiatives, but also by Microsoft. And we were set up really to drive a lot of the Microsoft platforms and make sure organizations make the right decisions in using and adopting the technology they purchase. So many of you, I'm sure, in the room have purchased large enterprise agreements. Many of you are talking to the different vendors about cloud and the different cloud platforms, SaaS, PaaS, IaaS. In fact, I've even seen Star AAS, so you can substitute anything in that Star. And really what we're trying to do in terms of our cloud strategy is help you navigate that landscape, because it's an incredibly confusing landscape out there today. So before I go on, can I just ask a quick question? How many people here consider they have a cloud strategy? Yeah, so I've got 2 colleagues who put their hand up, apart from the people I work with. So a few of you. And I think that's kind of interesting, and it reflects a lot of the research that we've done over the past 2 or 3 years in terms of cloud computing, understanding how cloud fits into your overall strategy and your enterprise systems. Now, I don't want to sort of teach you to suck eggs. I don't want to go into the depths of the technology, but what I wanted to do is give you a little bit of perspective of how, you know, from an enterprise perspective and an enterprise point of view, the different factions within an organization represent new technologies. So as I say, I come from an enterprise architecture background, and I remember, as probably many of you do, service orientation. Again, I'm sure most of you have had service-orientated projects kicking off, and everyone started looking at the purchase of ESBs, and it's something that IT got very excited about. But the reason, in my experience, many service-oriented architecture projects and initiatives failed was because they failed to articulate the benefit of that technology to the business. So you started to talk about things like ESBs and SOA and all those types of tightly coupled, loosely coupled architectures. Very confusing. Very confusing for a lot of the IT folk, but certainly when you talk to the business, something that's very difficult to articulate in terms of why you're trying to deliver these types of services. So from an IT perspective, there is a danger that cloud gets considered in that same bucket to a certain extent. It's new technology. You know, we've got pictures here of some of the operations that we see in some of Microsoft's data centers. There's lots of great technology in there. There's lots of great benefits that IT talk about. We talk about commodity-based servicing, commodity-based technology. that we can deliver very quickly to an organization. And we talk about, or we hear about, this enabling you to reduce your costs. But there are other benefits in there, obviously, that we talk about, things like agility. But I think the interesting thing is then, when you start applying that, to the business, when you talk to the business. So the business look at technology as something that can help them achieve their goals. How can I adopt a technology? How can I take advantage of some of these technologies to drive key benefits for my organization? Do I want to spend all my money? We talked about again in the panel session, you have no capital expenditure budget this year. So how do I do more with less? How do I bring some real innovation into my organization? And just lumping that all into a cloud moniker can be scary. So it's our job as IT folk and as system integrators and providers to help explain how those benefits can be realized and how they fit into your organization and the organizations we're working with. And really, I see it, and I'm sure a lot of you do, it's just another technology that we can utilize. The key is to understand what that technology is, what its benefits are, and what its limitations are, and then build the strategy around it. So a cloud strategy is one thing, but actually, it's how does cloud fit into your overall enterprise strategy, and what aspects of cloud and the technologies that exist within cloud am I going to make use of? Because there are undoubted benefits, and this is just some results of a survey that we conducted over the last year. We went out to 600 organizations across 18 different countries to talk to them about how they saw cloud technology enabling their business. And yes, we saw a lot about how we could reduce upfront costs. We saw a lot about being able to do more agile, more flexible delivery. But some key ones in there about being able to react very quickly to market conditions. And arguably one of the most important, certainly in some of the businesses we work with, is allowing you as an organization to focus on your differentiation, to focus on how you add value to your bottom line. And I can guess for most people, with the exception of probably Microsoft and Google, that running an Exchange server is not what adds to your bottom line. It's not your core business. So how do we use these commodity services, whether it be platform as a service in what that provides, or SaaS, to move us from what we had in the old days of engineering, from having to dig your well when you deliver your engineering business, to having that water on tap and using that commodity. So I've kind of alluded to this already. There's no doubt that the cloud business has been adopted and is being driven by huge investment in the marketplace. Microsoft, Google, Amazon, Salesforce, very new player, if you like, not cloud, but in terms of the enterprise space, are putting a huge amount of investment and technology innovation to bring you some of these real benefits. But I think the thing for me is, again, from an enterprise perspective, from a CTO or a CIO perspective, or from a CFO perspective, how do I choose which of these technologies are right for me? Which of these technologies are going to deliver the benefits? Because I'm hearing different things from my IT departments, from my security departments, from my risk departments. And they're telling me things about whether it's secure, whether it's reliable, etc. So I've got to navigate this landscape, I've got to understand this landscape, and I've got to build it into my strategy that's right for me as an organization. And I can't remember who talked about this, but I couldn't agree more that it's about understanding how cloud fits for you as an organization. So despite some of those benefits we've kind of alluded to, we know that in certain instances, adoption is not as rapid, should I say, as we'd like. Obviously, we're seeing a lot in the SaaS space, and we talked about this as well in the panel. I think it was quite interesting and quite pertinent to this conversation that SaaS is moving ahead quickly because of its alignment to the business and the benefits that it can drive. But these are some of the common myths that we hear about. We talk about it not being reliable. It's not secure. Can I get the level of privacy? All of these concerns, to some extent, is slowing some of the adoption that as software vendors and providers we thought we'd have liked to see early on. But I think the key for me here is based on whose perspective. The cloud in every instance might not be reliable for every industry, depending on what you're trying to do. If you're doing real-time trading in an investment bank, then I would argue the latency to run against a cloud-based system based in Seattle or Amsterdam might not give you the types of resilience and latency you require. But if you're delivering websites that have to be up 98% of the time, then we know we've got the reliability. A lot of the cloud providers are delivering sort of reliability at 6 nines. So I think the key here is understanding how these myths or these concerns fit in and align to your organization and what your organization needs to achieve and deliver. So we know it's very difficult, for instance, in a lot of instances to deliver cloud-based services into the Ministry of Defense or into hospitals without them being very private, very bespoke cloud systems because of the regulations around that. So what I want to be talking about more here is how we look at the requirements that you need inside your organization and align those to some of the technologies we're going to talk about. So we mentioned that SaaS is leading the way, and again, just to make this real in terms of some of the discussions that have already been going on, in the survey and in the studies we've done, we see that there is a lot of spend going on in the SaaS marketplace. Half of the people out there are doing something with SaaS, whether it be Salesforce.com or Office 365, or indeed some niche players in there. And something like 60% of the respondents said they are deploying SaaS over the next year and are looking at spending a lot of their budget on cloud-based software as a service offerings. And I think that shows that alignment to the business is key to some of this adoption. The business start to see real value in this, and they're starting to adopt it. And this is nothing new. Part of my job at HBOS and at Lloyd's was to stop the business running away with technology that deliver short-term benefits. In fact, I'll rephrase that. Part of my job was to help my business colleagues understand the risks and the trade-offs they were making by not adhering to an enterprise strategy that was actually aligned to the business strategy anyway. And that's the key point for me, how you keep those in sync. What we are seeing, though, as an organization, is some very strong strategic cloud investment. So I'll just talk about 3 specifics here. Aviva is one of our sort of biggest clients. We deployed with them software as a service system to deliver collaboration, and it's very similar to the HR story that Andrew talked about, across 16 countries in a very rapid time frame. The key here again for me is it was that business driver to get something delivered quickly that met the rest of their requirements. Security was obviously one of those. But there was a trade-off there. There was a trade-off, and they were pulling levers to make sure that they could deliver a system that satisfied their business goals. Cone Cranes, again, looked at a cost-saving reduction. How can we reduce some of their costs in email and collaboration? Delivered very quickly, now saving millions of euros a year on a SaaS-based solution. But also, and it was kind of, I echo some of the comments that we saw about platform as a service, adoption is not as rapid. But I think we see the same as we look at all migrations, for instance. And a lot of the plays and a lot of the talk has been how we migrate from one technology to another. Instead, I think we should be looking at taking advantage of platform as a service when the need as a business materializes. So in this instance, eBay had a need to deliver a new service that was critical to them, but they didn't want it to impact their existing infrastructure. They saw that as a risk. So they delivered a system very quickly with us on Windows Azure, but interestingly enough, it was a Java-based application. So they were using the platform, but they were delivering their solution onto it very quickly. Again, there was a real business need there. It was time to market for that. So we start to see that there are some strategic cloud investments happening. And this is my only sort of stab at a cloud pun. There is a risk of rain and thunder when you look at cloud adoption. And I think the story Andrew talked about at the end of the panel session was illustrative of what we're seeing in terms of some of the potential problems with non-strategic cloud adoption. And I think more than just cloud adoption, non-strategic technology adoption. I've worked in many organizations where I've seen almost mini IT departments spring up to deliver some very quick benefit, and then in exactly the same way as we've heard, suddenly the business start talking about how we integrate that with our internal systems, how we make sure it's backed up. And that's when IT start to get involved. And that's when IT say, well, to do all that, there's an investment required. And actually, if we'd have been aligned at the beginning, we could have both been aware of this and we could have built systems that align to your needs and the greater needs of the company, whether that be integration or security or resilience or whatever they may be. So I mentioned this survey we did, and one of the things that came out of this survey was something we call cloud sprawl. And this is the non-strategic adoption of cloud-based services inside an organization. There are many reasons for it. Some of which are it's simply easier for me to do it myself within my business or sales organization. I speak to many organizations, and I'm sure my colleagues do as well, and they say, we're not interested in doing cloud. We think cloud is a little bit risky for us. But we have done Salesforce.com. We have put a lot of our core customer data and core customer information in Salesforce.com. And there's almost, to some degree, a separation between cloud and this business SaaS value. We also hear it takes too long for things to happen in IT. We hear about organizations that take 2-3 months to provision servers in their data centers. In this instantaneous world, that's too long for organizations to remain agile. So organizations and individuals within organizations have started provisioning their services very quickly to deliver the value they feel they need. But this cloud sprawl will cause problems. And I'm not here to tell you you've got to shut down every unauthorized use of cloud. I think the key here is, again, what I talked about is aligning business and IT, because IT really is an extension or part of the business. It shouldn't be seen as two separate entities. But if you don't do that, you have problems. You have problems with where your data is stored. You might be paying too much for the services you have. We've worked with customers, for instance, who've realized when they've done the audit that they're being billed upwards of hundreds of thousands of dollars per month by a cloud provider they didn't even know about. Because you can purchase cloud-based services on a credit card, and I can put that through my expenses. IT, the business, don't even know what those services are. So you need some kind of level of control to understand, so you can control costs and understand what their usage is. Data security is also an issue. Data sovereignty. How do I know who owns that data? If someone in my sales department has put data in a service and then they leave the organization, how do I understand where that data is, what access that person has had, and how do I ensure I can get my data back? So these are all things that we see as potential issues if you as an organization aren't defining a strategy to embrace cloud into your overall enterprise vision. So we talk about how we start to become strategic. How do you start to align your IT strategy and your business strategy, and as part of that IT strategy, what you're doing with cloud? And I think there was a really interesting comment in there about suddenly it seems when new technologies come about, and I've seen this in organisations I've worked directly for as well as some of the customers I work with, suddenly those customers, if you're not careful, expect the providers to do everything for them. We talk about saying, well, it's not my problem anymore. Well, if you take the cloud providers and in terms of data, for instance, they're really processing that data, but you as an organisation are the controller of that data. So you need to build your strategy and you need to understand what you need to provide as an organisation to support the strategy and the adoption of that cloud. So as part of the work we've done, we've defined almost a 5-step program. And it's a 5-step program that initially we put together in terms of cloud adoption, but I think anybody who comes from an enterprise architecture background or a chief technology officer background will see actually what we're talking about in these 5 steps, if you like, is how you start to define your overall strategy. So the first thing we talk about is actually how you, your definition and the communication of what you're going to do with cloud technology. Are you going to adopt it wherever possible? Then you need an audit inside your organization. What do you have today? What services do you have? How are they used and why are they used? Again, this audit, and it's working in partnership with your business partners, is not there to say we're going to close these things down, because if that happens, it will go underground. This is about understanding users' needs. It's about understanding the requirements. Once you've done that, you can start to define a destination and a roadmap that gets you to where you need to be as an organization. And that includes the cloud. So I'm not just talking here about the cloud on its own. And you'll see in an example I've got in a minute that you need to look at your entire application landscape. You need to look at the different options you've got for deploying those applications, and you can start making destination decisions based on where you are today. And over time, those destinations may change. And I'll come on to what I mean by that in a minute. And then the second, or the final 2 steps, should I say, are really about how you communicate that strategy and then continually refine that strategy to make sure it continues to be relevant to your organization and to your business partners. The worst thing you can do as an organization is stay rigidly aligned to an IT strategy, even though you see the business direction tacking in a different way. You have to continually keep lockstep with your business partners to make sure your strategy is aligned. So to do that, you have to start considering the organization's needs. What is it your organization is trying to achieve, both from a business perspective as well as a technology perspective? Some of the technology drivers are very well understood. Are you growing fast as an organization? Do you have large peaks in your usage? And we talk about terms like elasticity, infinite scalability, auto-scaling, all of these IT terms. We can see how those technical drivers are pushing us towards adopting cloud-based technology. From a business perspective, though, we talk about increasing our speed to market. How can we be very quick to react to market conditions? So if you're not embracing cloud technology today and at least considering it in your strategy, you will over time be overtaken. As I said, when I joined HBOS, it was quite interesting. Even at the sort of start of 2000, there was people inside the organization who were saying, we're not doing internet banking, we feel it's less secure than coming into your branch. You could argue that. But I think, and I nearly said if they didn't do internet banking, they wouldn't be around today, but they aren't around today, but that's for a completely different reason. But the point is, you have to have an internet banking strategy today. It might be less secure, than a branch environment. I'd argue it isn't, but the fact is you need to be playing in that space. It gives you new business models. So organizations might be looking to say, we have a lot of data here, we think we can sell it, but traditionally it's not been possible to build scale-out architectures that allow us to deliver that. So these are the business imperatives you have to understand when you're building your strategy. And other business imperatives, not just cloud ones here, are it has to be infinitely secure, if infinitely secure is even possible. But the key point here is there are business drivers. So I'm going to talk a little bit about an example here to try and hopefully make some of this real. It's quite a simple example, and we take the example of a fictional pharmaceutical organization. And many of you will have gone through this process yourself in your enterprise strategy definition of buy versus build. The packaged applications you go out there increasingly to purchase and source to deliver your business capability. And then there's the custom applications that you've built over the years that deliver key business services. And these exist in many different platforms, as we know. Then we can start looking at what your destination is. Is it on-premise? So is this your hardware, your management, your data center? Is it in the cloud? Again, I talked right back at the beginning. This is another deployment option, if you like. One of the things I hear a lot is, when are we going to the cloud? As though the cloud is some mythical nirvana that everybody needs to move to. Over time, more things will appear in the cloud. But certainly the choices today are at least threefold. And that's to stick it in some kind of private cloud, where that might be off-premise or on-premise, but it's managed a lot for you and you get a lot of that elasticity that we talk about. So when you consider your options, you can start to look at the types of applications. And I'm here to tell you, as someone in my early part of my career worked for Pfizer, pharmaceuticals is a lot more complex than 6 applications. But hopefully this illustrates some of the things we're talking about in terms of driving your strategy. So the ERP system. In this instance, the organization, I'm talking specifically about the organization, have an ERP system that's very costly to run. Made a lot of customizations. It's very difficult to replace. So in terms of scaling out, they have options to do things like virtualizing that in a private cloud. They can't move it to SaaS because they haven't got the model and the functionality it needs. CRM and email, on the other hand, they see as commodity. But email, they want to protect some of the customer data. They don't feel at this stage that that data, and we talked about this earlier as well, understanding your data. You talk about cloud and data security. You have to look at what data you have and what security levels that data needs. I'd assert that many organizations have never done that leveling, if you like, or classification of their data. So you can start to look at the destinations for these applications. HR systems, VB. What do I do with that? I could look at packaged applications I could buy, and I can stick that in my own data center because of the security implications. Although, as Andrew's illustrated, there are companies that say, well, actually, a SaaS-based model gives me bigger business benefits. So I could take that option as well. The key point here is it's based on your requirements and your assessment of risks and opportunities. Clinical trials, we can anonymize the data, but we need masses of computing facility. So again, platform as a service, it's a custom application I can look at taking advantage of. I can then start to spend real investment dollars on the thing that differentiates me as an organization. And for many pharmaceutical organizations, that's in your molecular and your clinical research. It's not on spending money on your CRM or your email systems. They're important to your business, but they're not the differentiator that you want to spend and invest your time and money in. So what we've done here in sort of 5 minutes is we've defined the destination for our application estate. The key point here for me, though, is these destinations will change over time as technology matures, as the requirements of your business change, as people become more risk averse, less risk averse. But the key here is you are defining a destination. You are working with your business to understand what those requirements are, and then you can start building your roadmap. So you've built your destination, or at least you have a roadmap and a point of view. You can then start looking at your technology, the things you use to build these platforms. Whether it be commodity-based systems, so adopting things like Google Docs or Office 365, you can start putting commodity-based SaaS systems out there. Your necessity platforms, things you need to run your business, your finance, your HR, often good candidates to sit in infrastructure as a service, platform as a service. Often, though, they need integration with your on-premise systems. So choosing platforms that give you that flexibility, I think, is important. And then finally, your differentiators. And I've put often too difficult or risky to move into the cloud. That might be the case today for some people. For others, their differentiation is in the cloud. Amazon is entirely in the cloud. What is their differentiation? So I'm not saying this is the definitive answer. The key, though, is the blue line at the bottom for me, is the integration between these different systems and these different technologies. If we're choosing different platforms, different technologies, we need an integration platform that makes that possible. And we talked about the SDKs, etc. But really, I think we're talking about how we integrate at all different levels in your architecture. So obviously we do a lot on the Microsoft platform, and this is not intended to be a shameless plug for Microsoft technologies. I think it's just there to demonstrate for me how you need to look at your SaaS and PaaS providers as well as the things you do on-premise. And how are you going to integrate at a security level, at a data level, at a messaging level, and indeed at a network level? Microsoft have a very strong story here. I think it's very powerful, the fact they've got so much investment on on-premise technology. Being able to burst out into the cloud and move your applications almost seamlessly is very much a strength of the platform. But using things like ADFS, we've got the ability to integrate with other cloud providers. And I think that gives a strong message in terms of how you secure your identity across all these different cloud-based technologies. So what we can do over time then is to develop this strategy. The strategy that's based, as I said earlier, on your business needs. Now actually, the business needs here are very simple. We've said that our differential business services need to run, at a very high-performant priority one availability. Commodity systems we're less bothered about. And we can start segmenting your application landscape. But as I said earlier, the key here is some of those differentiated business services can still run in the cloud, because actually it's differentiation in terms of compute power rather than availability or security, or whatever the levers that you choose to pull that are important for your organization. But invariably, what most organizations are going to, certainly in the enterprise space, are going to finish up with is a hybrid model. One that gives us on-premise, core differentiated applications that you feel at this moment in time, for whatever reason, cannot be moved into a cloud-based platform. You talk about your SaaS models, and we talk about our platform as a service. And being able to integrate that with your on-premise data, your on-premise security mechanisms, your on-premise networks is going to be key for you as an organization. So Avanade clearly is an organization that have spent a lot of time in this space, and we do a lot with our sort of parent company with Accenture as well, in defining processes that help you get to a point where you're defining your enterprise strategy and how the technology and your application landscape fits into that. So I'm not going to drain this slide, but I think in terms of looking at your roadmap, think about building your cloud strategy. Look at the technology assessments and pilots you can really get involved in. But also then look at how you're going to manage these applications as you go forward. We talked earlier about this is not sort of giving up responsibility for your applications. You've still got to manage the applications you build and the applications you run. Microsoft, for instance, aren't going to fix your application if it breaks on the Azure platform, if it's a problem with your application, or if one of your users has deleted the database. So just to summarize, and I thank you for listening, cloud adoption is clearly on the increase. We see that in all our surveys. But the word of caution, if you like, or the word of advice is to look at your strategy and understand what the needs of cloud and cloud computing are in your organization and how they play into your wider business strategy. With that, I'd like to finish. I'm not sure we've got any time for questions, but if you'd like, we're over outside. Come and speak to us. We'd be more than happy to talk to you about more work that we've done in this space. Thank you very much.